Okay. Gute Woche, allemaal. Just
Good luck.
Just before we start the actual shir, I'm looking at the Tonah Devei Eliyahu, which I mentioned. It's a minhag to read Tonah Devei Eliyahu on Motzei Shabbos, and so in the Perik Hay, Sif Yud Beis, there's a whole discussion about Yaakov and how when he goes to Lavan's house, and the Shekhinah says to him, Yaakov Bini, raise your eyes to heaven, and you see the 12 mazolos and kechavim in the sky, and the 12 hours of the day, 12 hours of the night, and that corresponds to the 12 shvotim which I will give you. And that's why he was so upset when Yosef was sold, because perhaps he had forfeited this bracha of having 12 shvotim. And then it says that Hashem gave him, at the end of his life, he gave him 17 good years. I just, you know what, I'm ready on this theme. I heard a very reiche word that during Yaakov's lifetime, he says, he's got gone through Soras Rochel and Soras this and Soras that, and then he comes to Mitzrayim, and suddenly the whole dynamic changes, and he has 17 good years. So I don't remember who it's from a Chassidish sefer, that when a person complains, sin is good, and keeps on complaining, and he says, Hashem, why do you give it so bad? So the Eibishter says, you know what, I can do it more in that way. When a person says it's good, it's gewaldig, and the Eibishter says, I'll make it even more gewaldig. So all Yaakov's lifetime, he was seeing all these tragedies which he suffered, and each time, and he was saying favos, and the Eibishter made another one and another one. When he came to Mitzrayim, and he saw that that Yosef had been sent down to Mitzrayim in order to bring about a Yeshua for Yidden and for the world. So then Yaakov sees that those tzaras were for a purpose. So he was able to see the goodness in his suffering, and the Eibishter says, you know what? So now you're seeing the goodness. I'll give you more. So his last 17 years, it was better and better. Okay, let's go to our Shia. And so we have Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Toldos. That's something you can see the screen, I hope, yeah? Good, okay. So following on from last week's shir, so we had the discussion about using paper, which has writing on it, to use it for wiping stuff. Now, the discussion last week was about embossed writing, whether that is an issue, and I said it is a problem. Like the problem with the biscuits, that the biscuits which have writing, or crackers which have writing on them, becomes a problem of mechika, of erasing, even though obviously you cannot use that, the space which you've erased the writing, you're not used for anything else. So it's but it still remains the Istur Midrabanan. So I mentioned last week that what about designs? Is there an issue of using a paper which has a design on it, which if it's not, it's a big issue, because many of those papers and kitchen or toilet tissues have little designs. And so here's the question. So I mentioned last week that I'm not sure about it, and I seem to remember, so I read it up this week. There's a sefer from Rebbe Levin, one of his numerous forum. He has a sefer called Shiurei Halacha L'Maaseh, and he talks about this, and he says that whereas crackers which have writing on them are a problem, but if it's a biscuit or something which has a picture on it, it's not a problem. And he brings proofs to this. So he brings several proofs. But what bothered me was, what's the logic here? So he explains the following. The writing on Shabbos is the Av Melacha. drawing a design, a diagram on Shabbos, but one who draws a picture on Shabbos is a tulda of writing. So again, there's the Av Malach and there's the tulda. Writing on Shabbos is an Av Malacha. Drawing a design on Shabbos, a design, a picture, a diagram, that would be a tulda. Now we're not talking about writing, we're talking about erasing. And now we have erasing writing and erasing a picture. And what Rabbi Levin is explaining, we said here that the erasing is not the Melacha Deraisa because you cannot use. It's not like you're erasing to create space. You're not creating space to write. So therefore, even the erasing is also not awesome in HaTorah. It's erasing, it's a midrabanon. So now, when it comes to such a moichik shelo almanas lichtoiv, so the chumra drabanon is only by writing mamish, but not for a design. So that's the explanation which he gives. And so the bottom line remains that if you have crackers which have a picture on them, so then you would be, or you have those, sometimes you have, I mentioned last week about in the shape of a fish or something, to eat a food which is in the shape of a something, not writing, that would be okay. That's his conclusion. And I'm happy with that. Because if I mentioned last week about the halacha in Hilchas Pesach, about the matzahs, that they shouldn't write on it Kohen Levi Yisrael with writing, because it might come to, because of the issue of eating and erasing the writing. But it looks like making pictures wasn't the problem of moichik. It was a problem of just the fact that you're patchking with the matzahs. It may affect the standard of kosher Pesach of the matzahs. Let's move on. So during the week, I also got a message that someone had quoted me as saying that you are allowed to put chocolate spread on biscuits which have writing, and then you'd be able to eat them. So I, Baruch Hashem, I'm still alive, and I'm able to plead innocent to the charges. And no, you would, if you have writing on a cracker, those, got these digestive biscuits, for example, to put writing on them is actually not allowed to put chocolate spread on them. You're erasing the writing, and that would not be allowed on Shabbos. It's fascinating. In the Gemara, it talks about when someone had written Hashem's name in a Sefer Torah, and he wrote it without the proper kavanah, shaloi lishma. So can he take a pen and write over the letters, kind of to renew the letters, l'shem mitzvah? And the halach is no, you're not allowed to. And the Gemara says it's moichik, so kosev al gabi ksav, to write on mamish, writing over the letters is called erasing the previous letters. I just want to refresh your memories. Some of you, it's total chiddush. About 30 years ago, the Rebbe pointed out that in the Siddur, when you take out the Sefer Torah, we have the piece of L'cho Hashem Agdula. So we have the pasuk Roimamu. And in the old Siddurim, it had just one pasuk of Roimamu. And the Rebbe raised the question, it should be both Roimamus. Like in Hoda, you have two psukim of Roimamu. And so the Rebbe took the view that actually there was a mistake in the Siddur, and it should have two psukim of Roimamu. So in one particular community, they printed up stickers with the appropriate paragraph with the two psukim of Roimamu and stuck it on top of the existing passage in the Siddur. So they made to upgrade their Siddurim to include the correction which the Rebbe had recommended. Now, I don't know how you say in English aftzalachas, but aftzalachas, it means just, I don't know what the word is, to spite. I don't know the exact word. Aftzalachas, most of the Siddur Tilas Hashem, when it has Hashem's name, it doesn't have Yud Kei Vav Kei, it has Yud Yud. But Avtzalachas, Dafka there, that piece of Roimamu, it had Yud Kei Vav Kei. And now to take a sticker, and now I'm explaining it, to take a sticker and stick it on Hashem's name, where it's got Yud Kei Vav Kei or any of the other of the 7 Shemus She'enam Nimchokim. So that would be an issue of Mechikas Hashem. To stick a sticker, to use Tipex on something, is considered erasing. So coming back to our chocolate biscuits, that's why I decided to address it. To put chocolate spread on top of writing and effectively erasing the writing would be a Is the Minhag. Okay. Now let's go on further. Going to our discussion again, last week we had a discussion about the tefillin and why is it important to cover the tefillin when you put on the tefillin? So Rabbi Tiefenbrunn pointed out to me that in the Sefer Erech Lechem that's the Marie Castro, Rabbi Yaakov Castro, his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. So he writes, that's what I'm pointing to on the screen, tefillin shel yad tzorich lechasosom, that the hand tefillin should be covered, because by the tefillin shel yad it says lecho, v'hoya lecho lo'ois al yodcho, in one of the parashas, in Parshas Boy, whatever. So it says it should be lecho lo'ois, so it should be for yourself, for private. It's not for public viewing. The Mishmir the Mishum Hochi. So he writes, the Marikash writes, Mishum Hochi Nagu lahafil betalis al hazroya b'shas hanochas tefillin shel yad v'chein roya linhag. He says it's for this reason that it's customary to, when you put on the tefillin, to cover over with your talus over the hand tefillin, so that it should be able to fulfill at that time l'chol lo'os. That's what Mahari Castro writes. And the fact that the tefillin are put on the upper part of the arm, I want to just throw in another interesting thing. One of the meanings of lo'os al yodecha, Pashtus you translate upon your hand, above your hand. In Gemara, it says al yodecha. The arm is above the hand; it's higher up. As you keep your hand in the the normal position, it's hanging down. So the arm, the upper arm, the bicep is al yodecha, is above your hand. At any rate, so the tefillin are put in a discreet place, and this is the lashon of the Taz. It should be above the kovdo. Kovdo is perhaps in Spanish, I'm not sure. That's written in the Shulchan Aruch. And the Taz says, Beloshen Ashkenaz, in German, Ellenbogen. The tefillin are above the elbow. Why do we know, from where do we know that the tefillin should be so high up? Since it says, V'hoya lechol ois, the tefillin should be in a discreet place. Shelo yedo hachutza. They shouldn't be visible to the outside. V'derech ha'odem legalis ad hakovda. It's normal for people to expose their arms from the elbow downwards. But about from the elbow upwards, so you're seeing here that there's this lotion, that there is an understanding that the upper arm is lecho, it's a private place. It's a more discreet place, and that's where the tefillin should be. So it looks like there's some emphasis of the tefillin should have to be discreet, it should be concealed. Now, we have now in the Gemara, in Menachos Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis, it tells us a story about someone who had a wound of some sort on his arm, and he was therefore wearing a bandage. And then he put the tefillin, it looks like he put the tefillin on the bandage. And there was a discussion about it being covered. And that the Gemara brings in this business of lechol lo'os. So what I want to say is, at this point, there is a machlokas haposkim, whether the tefillin ought to be covered or are permitted to be covered. And I'm going to read from the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. This is from Simon Chaf Zayin. This is what you can see on the screen. This which we say, the Shulchan Aruch says you should cover the tefillin, that's only when it's put in a place, Shadak Elias Bechus says that the Russian's a bit difficult over here, where it's like because of the circumstances, he put the shalyad where there is a bandage of sorts. Here the Alter Rebbe is following the Ramah. He says that tefillin do not have to be covered. And he says even if your shirt is torn and the tefillin are exposed, even though the tefillin are visible to others, it's not a problem. It's not that they have to be covered. It may be visible. The place of the tefillin is on the upper arm, which is a discrete place, which is normally covered. But this doesn't matter. It's not an issue for the tefillin if they are exposed. So here we have that the Ramo and the Alter Rebbe follow that you don't have to cover the tefillin, but you're allowed to cover. But as we know, we see that other poskim, and if you want to read up more in the Sefer Chikre Minhagim from Rabbi Yochanan Garari, so he has a list of about 6 or 7 poskim who dafka take the view that you should cover. Some of them also al pi Kabbalah, that the tefillin shel yad should be covered. And I think I mentioned last week that the Rebbe Rashab would pull down the sleeve on his tefillin after he put on the shel yad, before he put on the shel rosh. And I remember as a child seeing Reb Sadia Librov doing the same. So what I'm seeing is that seems to be an emphasis dafka that they should be covered. Now then, during the week, Rabbi Aaron Tiefenbrun told me that his shver, Rabbi Shalom Ber Eichhorn, used to be a meshamish in the house of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And so he heard not from his shver, he heard from one of his elder sister-in-law that in the early years, someone saw the Rebbe, our Rebbe, who was then a son-in-law, they saw him struggling to pull his sleeve down on his tefillin. Now this is an American in the 40s. And the fellow came over to the Rebbe and he says, why are you struggling? You can get a short sleeve shirt and you won't have to pull down your sleeve. And as we know, we saw the Rebbe would come in when he davened with the towels and tefillin. He wore a short sleeve shirt. Okay. Which at first I didn't understand what happened here. Because if the tefillin have to be covered, so what's the point of having a short sleeve shirt? And it just occurred to me, and I'm going to come back to my hunch, but let's go to the next slide. Yeah. Here I have a sefer. You have a sefer called Darkei Chaim V'Sholem, all about the minhagim of the Munketcherov. You have also of several Gedolei Yisrael where their Talmidim made a sforim about their hanhogas. You have a sefer Leket Yosher, which is a minhagim of Rabbi Yisrael, the Baal Tumas Hadesh and Rabbi Yisrael. So now there's a project which has produced 2 volumes so far about the minhagim of the Rebbe. So I'll just show you. I have it in my hand. It's called Hanhogas Rebbe. The first volume is called Orches Menachem, and this is where this comes from. This is what you have on the screen. So he writes here that the Rebbe Rashab was particular when he made the broch on the shel yad, that his arm and the tefillin should be covered. But there is an edus. This is the edus of Reb Leibel Grona, because the Rebbe put on his tefillin in his room, so no one else was there to see. That the Rebbe was particular to have the tefillin exposed when he made the brocha, and he didn't cover his arm with a talus, and he would remove the cover, as in the little plastic cover, the little card cover. He would take that off when he finished wrapping the 7 ritzuas, 7 rings around. Yeah. Kricha Zayin Haritzuas. It's a bit, the wording is wrong, yeah? Zayin Krichas Shel Haritzuas. It wasn't 7 straps. Before he put on the Shel Rosh, he would put back the cover. So interesting what's going on here. So my hunch is, yeah, Al Pi Halacha, the Shel Yad does not need to be covered. Al Pi Kabbalah, there is, or also some poskim, L'chol Ois, it should be covered. Who says it has to be covered by a sleeve? It can be covered with a plastic cover. With the lid which you put on, this what you call it, lid, whatever, that cover also fulfills the Inyan Locha. So perhaps in this book, in this Hanhogas, they point out, interesting, the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab will pull down their sleeves, and they didn't wear the shadel on the tefillin, and the Rebbe did. And it's unusual that the Rebbe should follow a different thing than what he saw by the Frierdiker Rebbe, etc. And now I think this is a plausible explanation. If you're wearing long sleeves, okay. In America, you don't need to wear long sleeves. It's not minhag hamokim dafka to wear long sleeves. It's not an issue of tznius, because that minhag hamokim is to wear short sleeves also. And so now, instead of pulling down the sleeve over the tefillin without a cover, the Rebbe says, okay, I'll put a cover. And with this is Mekayim the Inyav L'chol Ois. And it also explains why, even before putting on the shalosh, he puts back the cover on the tefillin, because the tefillin shayad, according to some poskim, it's better that it should be covered. So even before he goes to the shalosh, he already puts on the cover back on the shalyad. Okay, that's the order which I wanted to share with you. Let's move on. Someone asked, can you spread chocolate on digestive biscuits before Shabbos to eat on Shabbos? I think yes, that you would be allowed to do that. That because he wants to erase the writing with the chocolate before, so then it's okay. All right. Now, I feel a shtickle achrayis when there's something which is not so well known, and I have an opportunity to share it. Now, this what you have in front of you is a Siddur Torah. And this is the newest edition, which was published about 2 years ago. And what happened here was as in Kahos in New York, the people in there, they found a copy of the Rebbe's personal Siddur, where he had made notes on the margin, where it looks like he was noting the Hanhogis of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So there's 3 asterisks here. There's one asterisk after Pesach's Yodecha, another asterisk over there, Al Chayrotzen, and another one over there by the end of Halaluka. So by the first asterisk, so he writes, Biyodoi v'loi bertzua. What I noticed that the Rebbe, as in the Rebbe the Shver, he touches the tefillin with his hand and not with the strap of the tefillin. Achar kach al hayad. First he says the 3 words, Pesach es yodecha, then he touches the tefillin. The Rebbe was so focused on such a detail. Then after l'chol chayrotzen, so the Rebbe writes here, haktzitza min hatzad v'loi milmalo. That when the Rebbe would touch the head tefillin, he wouldn't touch on top of the tefillin, he would touch the sides of the tefillin. I can go into various conjectures. What's the reason for touching dafka the sides and not the top? I just want to show you the Lamaisa. That was what the Rebbe was noyeg, and the Rebbe is picking up. The Frierdiker Rebbe is medayik that when the Rebbe touched the head tefillin, he didn't touch on top of the tefillin, but he touched the sides of the tefillin. So it's a thing to know. It's not so well known. So I'll just bring that to your attention. Let's move on to the next question.
Sorry, what's the point? It says, Einu mashal shel behalel.
So what they I was trying to save time, but you stopped me there. Okay. I think what it means is some people, they say just going from one straight to the other. That means mishal shel behaluka, to go straight from one to the other. And it seems to be saying that the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't do that, but I seem to remember the Rebbe did. But okay, let's move on. I don't want to take time on that because I'm not too prepared on that. Okay. Now, someone in the United States has corresponded with me a few times, and he asked me, what is the minhag when you say a Misha Beirach for a person for a man who's a Kohen or Levi? Do you include the Halevi or the Hakoyen to say Mishabech whatever as Aaron Hakoyen ben Dina or whatever? Do you mention or whatever Moshe Halevi ben Tzipora? Do you mention the title Halevi? And he noticed that here there's a difference between the Litvische and the Chassidische. Although he didn't have any sources and he couldn't find any sources, where that the Litvish should just say the name, Chaim Dov ben Leah, let's say, even though he's a Levi. And by the Chassidish, he sees more that they would make a point of mentioning Hakoyen Halevi in the Misha Beirach. So I don't have any more detail on that. I just want to say, last week we had Rabbi Levitansky from Sumy in Ukraine. he verbringed with us last week. I don't see him here tonight. If he is, please. Oh, Rabbi Levitansky, can you share with us a story with your father, Olav Shalom? His father was Rabbi. What was your father's?
Avram Halevi Levitansky.
Rabbi Levitansky. And I asked him before Shabbos if he could share the story of when his father went into Yechidus. So the floor is yours, Yechiel.
Okay, quickly. So when my father was a chassan, he went in with his kala, with my mother, for Yechidus. He used to relate the story. He said usually when he went into Yechidus, the Rebbe always had a comment, something to say, something to correct, something always almog ibring cup. My father said he was always afraid to go into Yechidus because of Yechidus, but also because he knew he was going to get a comment. But when he went in with my mother, Al Tzchasen, he figured the Rebbe is a gentleman. The Rebbe is not going to say anything negative or he's not going to get a chelik in front of the kala. The Rebbe is not going to say anything. The Rebbe took the zettel, which had very little written on it, and my father said the Rebbe took it like this in his hands, and he went up and back about 3 or 4 times, and by that time my father was already drenched in sweat because he knew the Rebbe could read through a page in 2 seconds, but here the Rebbe was going back and forth and back and forth. There was nothing written on it, just his name and bracha for tzlacha. So then the Rebbe took the paper, put it down, took a pencil, and while he was writing, he said, "Wiffel mir wird bei ihm nicht beten, kämen nicht peulen, als soll zuschreiben an Namen, was der Rebester allein hat ihm gegeben von der Zeit von Moshe Rabbeinu." And as he was saying it, he wrote Halevi. He added Halevi to the name. My father realized that he just wrote Avraham ben Rivka. He forgot to write Halevi. And from that time on, all of the letters that my father received from the Rebbe, in the beginning, the Rebbe would add Halevi to his name. So you have a lot of letters where the Rebbe just added Halevi to his name. And then when the Maskiros caught on to that and they typed it in, the title, or I don't know, in all the letters it says that the city and the last name of the person that's getting it. So our last name, which is Levitansky, was always written Lamed Ayin Vav Vav Yud Tes Aleph Nun Kuf Samach Yud, which is the way all of my father's cousins wrote. There's letters from the Frierdiker Rebbe to my grandfather. Levitansky is written in Yiddish, Lamed Ayin Vav Vav Yud. And the Rebbe started sending letters. On the top was written Lamed Vav Yud Tes Levitansky with the first letters Lamed Vav Yud, omitting the Ayin and the extra Vav so that it should be visible Levi. And since then, actually, we changed our family name. Our family name, we now write Levitansky the way the Rebbe changed it. But it was obvious, at least to my father, that the Rebbe was sending him a message that, this is something that you need to constantly write.
So thank you, Rabbi Yechiel, for that ma'aser. Okay. Covered lots of Shabbos.
Derech Hagav, somebody sent to me a note that the Rebbe, he asked me if it was for my father. It's not. Because this was in Yechidus, so it wasn't, but he sent in the Rebbe's Ksav Yad, where the Rebbe writes, Lahoisif Halevi, Shem Shakadosh Baruch Hu Nasan Lei, Shem Shakadosh Baruch Hu Nasan Lei, is the same concept. That's in the Rebbe's Ksav Yad.
So, shkoyach for that, and yeah. Right, thank you for sharing. So let's come back to say, I just see some Reb Aryeh is asking, touching the tefillin with hand and then mouth, or touch the tefillin. I think the minhag is to go. I don't remember now. As far as I remember, we do put it in the hand, but there's a discussion in the Gemara about this. According to one way of learning the Gemara, we'll have to come to that another time. Let's move on. Someone's asking, did the Rebbe put the Halevi after his or after his father's name? No, it was just his name. Yeah, and the Rebbe didn't write your father's name in the letter. Let's move on. Okay, a little bit to appreciate the significance. is that you have a Sefer Chassidim here. And when the question here is, when you pray for someone, do you add a title? So here we have the Sefer Chassidim, for those who are not familiar, was written about 800 years ago. It's from one of the Bali HaTosfos, the Yehuda Chassid. And he writes the following. Odom shemispalil al oviv, one who's praying for his father, imu choile. His father is not well. Lo yoima terape abomori. Ladoini aborape. You don't mention the title Abamori, my master, my father. Ki Shlomo Oma David Ovi. When Shlomo speaks to Hashem, he says David Ovi. Elisha says Elokei Eliyahu. He doesn't say Adoni. Eved Avrom Omar Elokei Adoni Avraham. By contrast, Eliezer does say Elokei Adoni Avraham, because Eliezer was not a Ben Choydin. Therefore, he wasn't allowed to mention Avraham without Adoni. But here is this sensitivity of not kind of, and the poskim bring this lahalocha, and they use the term ein gavus lifnei hamokim. You don't daven to Hashem. You say such a person is so important, and therefore you should give him a Yeshua, because everybody in front of Eibishter, everyone is insignificant. So then becomes the question. But in benching we say Harachamun Yevorches Avi Moiri. And by Yizkir, you say also, you mention your father's name, your mother's name, if you're saying Yizkir, and you mention also the Abba Mori. So what's the logic over there? So the footnote, the bottom of this is a Moker Chesed. This is written by Reb Reuven Magolis, who was a phenomenal Boki, who lived in the 50 years ago, 40 years ago. He wrote a host of Sforim, Margolis Hayam, etc., the Zohar, within its Zohar, etc. At any rate, he makes the following comment. Yitochen shebeyichud bechoile. That which we say, do not mention Abamori, is when you're talking about praying for someone who's ill. The Isra Mazle, because at that moment, he is not in a fortunate position. And he's being scrutinized from above. Then it's not appropriate to start saying he's such a wonderful, such a great person. Then you just make it as plain as possible. But when you are giving a blessing, it's not that the person is in any particular predicament. Then it's okay to add a title. As we say in benching, and also when you make a Misha Beirach for Godel HaKohol, for Gedel HaKohol, so it would be, you'd say, Harachman Yevorech, as Morenu V'Rabbeinu, or whatever, Harav so-and-so, and that's okay to give a title. In other words, he's saying to add a title in a bracha, not in a state of chayli, that's okay. It's only when there's a chayli situation, etc., that's when you should make it as simple as possible. And he adds, K'mishanog b'Moshe Rambam. In the days of the Rambam, in the lifetime of the Rambam, they would say, V'chayechun v'yemechun v'chaye Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon. They mentioned in people in Mitzrayim, wherever it was, on Taimon, they added the name of Moshe ben Maimon in Kaddish. But the Kiddush here is, they said, B'chaye Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon. They're davening, and they threw in the word Rabbeinu. And that is bringing, Reb Reuven Magolis is bringing a raya, that to mention in a prayer, which is not in a particularly worrying situation, to throw in a prayer with the title, that's appropriate. Okay. Although coming back to the Misha Beirach for Levi and a Kohen, even there, it's not as if you are giving them covered. It is an identification. He's a Levi. That's part of his identification. So I don't think one need to hesitate. Okay, let's move on to something fairly simple, but a very common misconception. So here we have, there's a very common design of a patio doors. Now, as you can see here, the mezuzah has been placed over here to the far, well, as we're looking at the picture, it's been placed to the far left. No, I wasn't in this house, so I can't tell you the facts, but in this case, sometimes you have both doors slide. Sometimes only one door slides. which means that where I'm pointing with the cursor now, that is where you can walk through. Obviously, don't try walking through when there's a glass there, yeah? Make sure it's slid to the side. Otherwise, it might be, cause some damages, etc., unless you're insured. Yeah, that's over here. But if this part does not slide, if the left side, if the left panel doesn't slide, then for all halacha purposes, this is a wall. This is a wall made of glass. So what? But you don't put a mezuzah 2.5 feet away from the doorway. If the doorway here is 30 inches wide, let's say, so the mezuzah belongs either over here where I'm pointing with the cursor on the left side, it might belong on the other side, but it certainly doesn't belong all that far away from the where you'd walk through. It's a very common mistake, and that's why I felt I wanted to share it with you, although it's a l'chayra dover hapashat. Let's move on. So now someone asks the question. Send me, it's very nice. People send me the pictures and it saves me having to search for graphics. Yeah. So now it sends me the question. You have the head fill-in. The head fill-in, if you walk into a shul, you don't have your own fill-in. So the halacha is you're allowed to use someone's tefillin there. It happens to be that the person borrowing that tefillin does not have the same size scalp, same size head as the owner of the tefillin. So there's always an issue of adjusting the size of the strap to make it fit. And then obviously it's a mitzvah to allow someone to use your tefillin, but you don't really feel like coming in the next morning at 7 o'clock, you're kind of half asleep and you have to, someone borrowed my tefillin, they don't fit, they're too big, too small. So really, if you borrow someone else's tefillin and you do adjust the straps, make sure you get them back to the way they ought to be. It's like when you borrow someone's car and you move the seat all the way back or all the way forward and they come in, they can't fit in the car, or the mirror. So, all right. So now coming back to the tefillin. So here, the question was, can you, as you can see on the picture, can you just pull this strap, this strap which at the bottom of the daled, to pull it a little bit, then it's going to remain a loose loop over here. And you'll be able to adjust it to fit your size without having to go through the headache of loosening the back and having to readjust it afterwards. After davening, just pull it tight again. And, as they say in England, Bob's your uncle, yeah? In Ukraine, they don't say that. So, okay. So now, so I've actually looked into this. And my conclusion was it's not okay. The tefillin have to be secured on the head and on the arm by a kesher. If here you're somehow fiddling around and really what's securing it, it's not tight on your head by the means of the kesher, because the kesher is loose. So it's missing in the firmness which you need to have, just like the hand tefillin has to be a kesher. I'll give you an example. Let's say you pick up you wear tefillin nusach Ashkenaz and you pick up Sfard tefillin, and so the Sfard are rolling this way. So now with the Ashkenaz kesher you can't do that. How about you just wrap it around a couple of times and it's going to keep the tefillin in place? But it's not the kesher keeping it in place. It's just that you get wrapped it around 2 or 3 times is keeping it in place. That's not okay, because the tefillin have to be secured on the arm, or kshartan, they have to be secured via a kesher. And the same thing, the tefillin shel rosh have to be secured via a kesher. So I told the young man, this is not okay. You'd have to go through the effort of actually adjusting it properly. And of course, if it's borrowed, when you're finished, put it back properly. Let's move on. Okay, another question which came in this week. Someone asks me, is a car a kli shomlachti leheter? And I want to clarify that in Hilchos Muksa, we've got, should we say, 3 levels? We've got Muksa Gomer, which you're not allowed to move even if you need the space. So for example, a bag of sand, building sand, not talking about for children, which they play in the sand pit, that shouldn't be muksa because it's made for playing, but building sand is muksa. A can of paint is muksa machmas gufay. Raw potatoes, a can of dried beans. These are all things which are muksa machmas gufay. A packet of flour. There's nothing you can do with them with Shabbos. So these are commodities. A stone. These are all things which you cannot process these things on Shabbos, and they are called muksa machmas gufay. And you're not allowed to move them even if you need the space. Then we've got Kalishon Lachte Leisur, a keli. So a hammer, a screwdriver. You want to use a hammer to crack nuts, and Chabad don't crack nuts on Shabbos. I know. You want to take a screwdriver to wedge a door open. So you are allowed to improvise. A klisha malachtel isur is not muksa gomer. You are allowed to improvise and use it for. Right. Then you got a klisha malachtel heter, a chair, a table, a dish. These are klisha malachtel heter. What's the difference? The difference is that if you go into your garden and it's beginning to rain, and you see there's a screwdriver there, there's a hammer there, or it's in the front garden. In some parts of the world, it may not be there by the end of Shabbos. So are you allowed to take it to safety? So the hammer, you're not allowed to, because you're allowed to improvise with the hammer. You need the hammer to support something, or you need the space, but to salvage, to preserve the hammer, you're not allowed to move it. If you have a chair, someone took out one of the dining room chairs, yeah, and they left it out in the garden, the front garden, and you're worried it get damaged, get stolen. You're allowed to bring the chair in for safety. So this is the difference between klishim lachtel heter and klishim lachtel isser. So now this is what the question of this fellow is actually from Pittsburgh, I believe. He asking me, what is the status of a car? Is a car a klishim lachtel heter or klishim lachtel isser? Of course, we're talking about closing the door of a car, opening the door of a car, or closing it. And someone left the door open, and there's no light which is going to go off or on because of closing the door. So he's asking, are you allowed to close the door of the car? And he's asking me, why is the car a kalisha malachta lehet? What's his theory? Well, a car is made for sitting. It's got seats in it. You can sit in the car. Then he writes, it's good for holding coffee. I don't know, perhaps he's got, I just read someone who had this with a CD holder, yeah? The CD drive he used as a cup of coffee holder. So, okay. So he's seeing a car as a klisha malachta leheta, possibly. So, and there's a whole discussion in Prima Godim. What happens if it's a kind of a 50-50? It can use bilaheta and leisser. He asks also, you have a pen knife, these Swiss knives, and it's got a screwdriver, and it's got a knife, and it's got a scissors, and it's one item which has got a functional heter and functional isser. So according to Prima Godim, it have to be that the heter stuff has to be the majority. But the Mishnah Berurah in Bir Halacha challenges this, and Reb Chaim Noah also follows that according to the Alter Rebbe, there's no need for a 50-50, and if it's also designated for heter and for isser, it's permuter. I'm going to read the lashon of the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. This is some from Shin Ches. That's the bottom of the column, of the screen. Klisham lachter leisser ule heter, a utensil which is functional for permitted and for forbidden activity. Mutter letaltila, you are allowed to move it even to preserve the kli. Kedin klisham lachter leheter. So here you have the answer. If it's functional for both heter and isser, you are allowed to move it. Is designated for permitted activities also. The source for this is in the Shiltei Giborim, which is on the margins of the Rif in Gemara Shabbos, and he talks about a broom. Now, as we know, we're not allowed to sweep up in the outside where there may be cracks between the paving stones, and you may be, as you're sweeping, you may be mash v'gumos, you may be filling in the paving stones. You're not allowed to sweep outdoors on a patio, etc. But you're allowed to sweep inside, where you have, Baruch Hashem, nowadays we don't have so many cracks in the floorboards in our houses. So you are allowed to sweep where in karka merutzov, inside, indoors. So is this broom muksa or not? So the Shiltei Giborim says it's not muksa because it's functional leheter or leisser. That's the source of this halacha. So I felt to say that a car is a klisha malachta leheter because it's got seats, I felt that's a bit of a stretch, because you don't buy a car for seats. The seats are there because when you're driving as a passenger or as a driver to get from A to B, which is a forbidden activity on Shabbos, I say have a seat, but that's not to say that the car is made for seats. I found it as a stretch. So I told him no, but then he sent back to me, I think, this is a tshuva from Igros Moshe, And the very same question, are you allowed to open the door or close the door of a car? So Moshe says, if it's in a situation where there's no maris ayin, let's say the car is parked in a place where it's not exposed to the street, and you wanted to take something out from the car, you would be allowed to take it out, of course, where it would not activate a light. I can tell you the light in my boot in American called trunk, it doesn't work. So yeah, so that's a good example. Yeah. So then he says that first of all, so to take something out of the trunk or out of the boot, so Moshe says you'd be allowed to. Then he said, well, that's poshut, yeah, because even Kalisham Lachtel is, so you're allowed to you're allowed to lift the door open. But then he says, what about closing the door of the trunk? You'd be allowed to close the trunk also. It goes in. It's people keep stuff in the car. It's like a storage place, and therefore, so long as it's not going to be raising brows, Rabbi Moshe says it's okay, which I find very interesting. And as I'm reading this now, I'm thinking perhaps he only meant the door of the trunk, which there is Saka used for. He says the Lashon. What does he say? Harbe inchi oisin kain lahashir sham dvorim. People keep stuff for storage, for safety in the car. He may be talking about the trunk. I don't think people keep stuff in their car in the main cabin for storage. I don't think that's a normal thing to do. So I'm not sure whether my feeling is generally that it's not a good idea. I think Ramosha also agrees it's not such a good idea. Generally, he seems to be a bit more makel than I was ready to go. Okay, let's move on. Okay, the next thing I have is someone asks me that his wife and he and his wife have started buying organic eggs, and they've noticed that they're finding a lot of blood spots, and they're asking for solutions. So now, first of all, I want to clarify there's a difference between free range and organic. When you say but before that, why does it make any difference, laloch? Laloch, if an egg is found to have a drop of blood in it, so the lotion of the Gemara is shodo tichlo bekoila. It's totally damaged, and it's as if that's the beginning of the formation of a chick. And if you opened up an egg and you found a little chick inside, so you wouldn't be allowed to eat it because what's a kosher chick? But it's dead and it wasn't shechted. Yeah, so this pathetic little chick you find inside a cracked open egg is not kosher because it didn't have shechita and it's a bit late to shecht it now. All right. So if you find a blood spot, it's the beginning of the formation of a chick, and that's why the blood spot makes the egg tray. All right. But if it's a hen which has not mated with a rooster, so then that's in the Lashon of the Gemara in the Shchonoch, Safna Di'ara. It gets its stimulation by rubbing against the floor. So then the blood spot in such an egg does not make the egg tray. Max is that the blood itself, that trace of blood, should be taken and discarded, but the rest of the egg, min hadin, is not osur. The minhag is, I must say, the minhag is that we do discard an egg with a blood spot, even though the majority of us are using eggs from what we call battery farms, where they don't have mate with roosters. So the minhag is to discard that egg, but certainly there's room to be makel. If someone asks me, they fried an egg and then they saw a blood spot. So my response to that, ask a question, answers with a question. So I asked him, do you use free range eggs or do you use the regular battery eggs? And if they use the battery eggs, so then I tell them they don't have to kasher the pan. By the way, you can't kasher a Teflon pan because you'd have to use the blowtorch and then you can just say Kaddish. That's with the, but now coming back to the question with the free range or organic. Organic means, I made a bit of research, organic means the food which is given to the chickens, to the hens, is organic food. It doesn't mean that the farmer goes running around the farmyard finding where they've laid hens. Then there's another madrege. Then you've got free range. The free range is much more, and I don't even know whether they have schorim running around also, but the free range means that they're running around. There's much more likelihood they have schorim there as well as nekevas, and maybe a bigger child. Why do you find blood spots in brown eggs more than white eggs? Is a simple thing that the egg production, the farms, they don't want you to find your pathetic little chick inside the egg. So every egg is candled. They put it under very strong light, and the light shines so powerful that you can see through into the egg whether there's something, a foreign body there. The brown shell of the egg interferes with the intensity of the light, so many more impurities escape the candling in brown eggs than they would in white eggs. That's a simple thing. It's not in why they're brown, why that was got to do with the feed perhaps, but Lepoil. So back to his question, what are the solutions? Well, if he would find organic white eggs rather than brown eggs, he might have a greater proportion of kosher results. But meanwhile, yes, you buy brown eggs, you're going to find a lot more blood spots, and especially if they're free range, you can't use them, and so it is a hefsid. But what can we do? Right. Someone points out that in some places where there's not enough accommodation, so sometimes people will sleep in their cars. That would be true, and that if you are meyachad it for that purpose before, and it's soich mekoimoy, soich gufoy, that would be okay. You don't have to, even without meyachad. The question is about closing the door of the car, opening because you want to sleep in the car and it doesn't have any lights activated. That would be called the soich gufoy. That would be okay. Look here, gufoy tarti mashma, yeah, gufoy the car and gufoy will schlafen. But the shaila would be whether you can close the door of the car, and that would be to protect the car. And here's the chiddush of Reb Moshe. No, say it. Right. Let's move on. Almost run out of time. Someone asks me about Tfilas Haderech. Now here, this is, Adafka picked out the first print of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, and he writes here, Tfilas Haderech, Tzorech loimar michshiyachzik b'herzik b'derech kutz le'ir b'yem rishik sh'nesei mi'beisei, toiv loimar me'umar di mefshe bekal, uvish'or hayomim shemis'akiv b'derech. The other days which you are still out of, you're away from home, at shuvoi lebeis, until the day you go back home. So you're on a journey, and it's a several days journey. All the days while you're away from home, yoimar oiso b'chol boiker afilu b'molin. So you should say Tfilas Haderech every morning. Now that's why it's there in the siddur right after davening, even as you are in the hotel. But because it's a suffix, whether you should or you shouldn't, because here's a suffix whether Tfilas Haderech is for the journey, or is it like Shemona Esther, you daven every day, so Tfilas Haderech should be said every day. And therefore, to Yotze that shita, look in Pri Chodosh, where's I think in Siman Kuf Yud, so he says, V'yachtim boruch ato shemei tefillah b'li azkaras Hashem. So if you are on a journey for several days, so then you'd say Tfilas Haderech every day, but you would not say Baruch Ato Hashem Shemei Tefillah, you just say Baruch Ato Shemei Tefillah. So now the question which is being asked, what about if it's on Shabbos? You've gone away for a few days and you're also Shabbos in a hotel, whatever. Should you say Tfilas Haderech? And so someone says, well, yeah, you should say it. And then there's someone said, I was quoted as saying that you shouldn't say it. So yeah, the thing on Shabbos, you're not meant to be mispalel al tzrochov. And I was once had this thing, and you can't say such a thing on Shabbos. How can you say Tfilas Haderech? It's bakosha tzrochov and be saved. It's now that then. So someone said, but in the morning brachas, you say in Hirotzin, yeah, sometimes it works. So now you're saying this in the morning. You're saying this every day on Shabbos also. So in benching, we say re'enu zoinenu. Re'enu means pasture us, provide for us. And so what about benching on Shabbos? So the Yerushalmi says, Toifus brochus kachu. that you can say, and since it's in the regular format of the daily davening, toifus brachas kachu, you're not creating a separate tefillah. It's within the regular format, so you can say it, toifus brachas kachu. So actually, in the Alter Rebbe Siddur, we actually change on Shabbos from re'enu to ro'enu. Yeah, we change. But the Welt doesn't have this change, and they're relying on the Yerushalmi. The Alter Rebbe made a little tweak and solved the problem. But okay, that's re'enu zeinin. So coming back, so the fact that you say mipegaro, mishachenro, etc., in that and every day, so you say it on Shabbos also. Tofes brachas kachu. But when it comes to saying Tefillah Saderech, which is a standalone, then that wouldn't be okay. Doesn't Shabbos you don't have Bakash Strachav. Now we have one last point. And that is that someone has been asking me, not so much the halacha, but a background. We have this bakosha, this vidui, which we say in Krishna Shalamita. In the old Tilas Hashem Sidurim, it wasn't there. And I remember when I was a Bach in Yeshiva, someone made a photocopy, you're talking about 45 years ago, to make a photocopy with a ganze yichus, photocopy, and I had it stuck with the sellotape into my Scotch tape in American, stuck into my Mincha Ma'ariv. It wasn't there, but this is in Torah Siddur, and Alter Rebbe's original Siddur. This is on the first print. So we have this Yerotzim, which talks about the Dalad Misses, and it ends off based in Hagodel Shebirushalayim al Dvar Kvitchemechu. And so, if you know the dinim of Dalad Misses, there's a concept. I must tell you this one. There was a Dayan here in London, Dayan Abramsky, and the Rebbetzin Abramsky was sitting at some reception, and there were the three other Rebbetzins of the three other Dayanim, and he was the fourth one. He became Osher Rav Bestin. So she's sitting at the table, and someone comes over, and she says, "We are the Arba Mrs. Besdin." Okay. So we have here the Arba Mrs. Besdin can be provided for, if that's the right word, by a Sanhedrin Ktana. Sanhedrin Ktana means 23 Dayanim. You don't need to have a Sanhedrin Gdoila based in Hagodel. So why is there the emphasis here of based in Hagodel Shebirushalayim? So back and forth, and someone suggested it means Yerushalayim Shalmaila. At any rate, I did some research. It says in Gemara, in Gemara Avodah Zorah, Daf Zayin Amid Beis, whatever, somewhere around there. Misherobu haratzchonin, golza lo Sanhedrin v'yoshvu lo b'chanus. So that once there were so many murderers, so the Sanhedrin exiled themselves from the Lishkas Hagozis, which is adjacent. It's like opens to the Azora, and they moved into the stalls. The Chanus was an area within the Harabayas, but it wasn't. They moved away to kind of disengage the power to carry out Mrs. Bestin. And you look in Rambam, it says in that so long as the power of the minor Sanhedrin is only when the major Sanhedrin, Besdin HaGodel, are in power. But when the Besdin HaGodel are not in power, for whatever reason, so the minor Besdin are also disempowered. So that's on one level. This is what he's saying here. The Arba Mrs. Besdin are only empowered when there is a Besdin HaGodel Shebirushalayim. Okay, but still and then I found something further. In the back of the Shalom, the Sefer Shalos, this I found through mechanical searches. It wasn't on Shabbos. So in the back of the Shalos, you've got it's Esa Hilulim, Asore Hilulim. So he has a long tefillah which also goes through the Arba Mises and Pegima and the various letters. But then he says the following. Then towards the end, Yerotzim Milfonecho, that it should be what I did. My prayer should be Ki'ilu Nechnachti Betabas Beis HaMitbechaim B'Mikdosh. The chenek should be counted as if it was Beis HaMitbechaim Sheb'Mikdosh, and Ki'ilu Neherakti B'Macheles HaMyuchedes L'Shchitas HaOilos. Ki'ilu Nisrafti Ever V'Kol L'Ishim L'Reach Nechoyach. Ki'ilu Ovo Alai Din Skila B'Mitz and Ki'ilu Nesesi Ofor Al Mizbach HaToher. Fascinating. He says he associates the Arba Mises as if they were done. We know the Ramban in the beginning of Vayikra says the korban is as if this had been done to me. So in this Yehirotz in the Shalom, he has there nusach that each of the Arba Mises somehow associate with the Karbonis, which now explains to me why it kind of is connected to the base Nagodl B'Shushalayim, which was right next to the Mizbeach, etc. Which now I understand perhaps why with the association over here. Just our couple of comments we have here. Someone is pointing out that Rabbi Reitschik, Olav Shalom, used to say every day when he was not in New York by the Rebbe. He traveled a lot also. But actually, I know that my uncle, Label Raskin, who was in Morocco, he also said Tfilas Haderech every day. But being in Morocco, possibly there was a reminder that you need to say Tfilas Haderech there every day. Someone's asking here, what happens on the last day of the journey? So the answer to that is that when it says Ad till the day you come back, I've made this mistake, but I understand now the day you return is a new journey. And so on the return journey, you actually say Tfilas Haderech with Hashem's name. And I would not say it in the hotel in the morning before leaving. On the contrary, I'd wait till I'm actually journeying. And generally, I was once in, I think it was Stansted Airport. I was going to go to Munich or something. And I'd already said Tfilas Haderech in the airport, and then they cancelled the flight because there was snow in Munich. So since then, I don't say Tfilas Haderech in the airport, and I wait till I'm actually on the plane. It's also nicht so sicher because but once I'm on the plane, I kind of feel like Chazaka, we're probably going to take off at some stage, sooner or later. All right, so I'll leave you with that, and we sollen alle sein gesund und treffen sich Gesundheit, and wish you a gute Woche and a freilichen Tamid.
I thought you actually say Tfilas Haderech as the plane is taking off.
I don't want to say Tfilas Haderech as the plane is taking off, because there is a preference that Tfilas Haderech is an excerpt of Shmoyne Esrei. And if you start standing up during takeoff, you're going to have a major chil Hashem. Will you sit down at the back of it? And so, yeah, so to be able to say it standing, I prefer to say it before I actually sit down, obviously, yeah. All right. Yeah, a good Tavach, Alaman.
Although it's
Good Tavach.
And if you're in a car, Rabbi asking.
So if you're in a car and you're driving, you don't stop on the hard shoulder. It's illegal and it's dangerous. If you can pull up in a gas